What is up, everybody? Welcome to this Trainwreck Sports podcast where we are here to pay the bills. And you know what? What a week to be here. What a week to be paid. I feel like if our bills were getting paid, if we were getting paid like that, we got like $1 million on Sunday. Like the week before, it was like, oh, you're gonna get Monday night. The hype is high, huge game. This could be the bounce back. And it was like, yeah, actually, we don't have money in the budget this week, so none of you guys are getting anything. And this week, they hit us with the double, the triple, the quadruple, all the holiday bonuses. So we're feeling good. Vibes are, well, we're going to see how the vibes are with everybody. But Jake Micah joined, as always, here by my co-host, Michael Partham, and Carson Hayak, back for the second week in a row. Carson, thank you again for joining. We'll start with you, Mike. How are your vibes coming out of Sunday's huge 32-6 victory over the New York Football Jets?
Jake, it's a Festivus miracle is all I got to say. I mean, where did this come from? Where was this all year? I mean, of all the teams, the great horcrux of Josh Allen and the Bills for the last year and a half or 2 years, we didn't just overcome them. We annihilated them. More so than any other team has this year so far. A great defense, a lauded defense, pretty much the only bright spot on that team. And we just went out and made them look like fools. So let's get into this.
Hell yeah. How about you? How you feeling, Carson?
The vibes are so high right now, but I'll tell you what, I don't want to be the one that gets caught on too much of a high. Remember, James Cook scores that touchdown. And I text my friends, I'm like, hey, the Bills are so back. And the response I get was, okay, take it easy, buddy. It's the Jets. So, I'll tell you what, though. They come into Philadelphia and they get a win. Oh, we're back. We are back. That's how close I am right now. So, I mean, I think the vibes are high, but you got to give it at least one more week.
All right. Well, you're tempering it a little bit, Carson. Mike's pretty hyped up. My vibes all the way there. All the way there. I was watching that game last night, and I tweeted out that the Eagles are food, and that's where I'm at with this Bills confidence level. But let's get into last week's game because it whatever it did. Go ahead, Mike. Whatever it was, if it looked different, felt different, one way or the other, there was something different.
Back, so we got to reflect them now.
Yeah, there we go. That's a great touch for where we're at with this game. Like everything felt right about the Bills. Like it just felt like the Bills that we've seen from the last couple years with Josh Allen. Started off with a couple design runs. I think Maniac tweeted out today, like the fact that they were willing to let Allen go out there, and whether that was a Dorsey thing, whether it was a McDermott thing, maybe we'll never actually know. But that was like the first sign of intent. Like this is going to be the Bills getting back to themselves. And you see some numbers today from a lot of the EPA stats and how this is the second least efficient offensive performance from the Bills this year. And to say to that, maybe some high variance is exactly what the Buffalo Bills need. Maybe efficiency and being a low positive team is not what this Buffalo Bills team thrives off of. Mike, what do you think? I know that you probably studied through and looked through the stats today and everything. And I just don't think I think that all year it's been a war between the Bills' performance and what the advanced statistics say. And I feel like Sunday was the biggest difference because that was the most comfortable and the most explosive the Bills' offense felt, obviously. And then it doesn't reflect on these things. So how do we go into like each week looking at these things, as the discourse starts through the week?
I mean, less and less. I mean, what EPA per play and DVOA are measures of moving the ball, not scoring per se. They're based on longer fields, less explosive plays, more plays per drive, invite more variability and the possibility of error. That's what I learned from Bruce Nolan a couple weeks ago. And success rate, that's also a per play thing where you get a percentage of the yardage you need on first, second, and second down. And of course, on third and fourth down, you want to just get the first down as it is. And I actually threw a tweet out to some of the Cover One guys just today, including Aaron, with my evaluation of success rate. Because let's say you have the Khalil Shakir 80-yard pass. That's a single play. That's only measured as one success. But let's say you took your next drive, or an alternate drive was a 10-play 80-yard drive. Now that's 10 plays in which you had success on. That's 10 plays that contribute to your success percentage. the one play is just as valuable as the 10-play drive, with less time, of course, taken up by it. But if you take time possession out of it, they generate the same amount of points, but they're not going to contribute the same amount to success rate because it's only one play on the clear secure play. So you could have theoretically that be your first play of the game, and then your next series be a 3-and-out. Now that would generate, at least thus far in the game, 25% success rate. But let's say you had the 10-play 80-yard drive, and then you went 3-and-out. Now you have 10 out of 13 plays of success, and that's going to make your numbers look a lot better as far as that particular statistic goes. But you still get a touchdown either way. So success rate, EPA, DVOA can be a little deceiving as far as, it can be indicative of how successful you are in the majority of your plays. But if some of your plays are so explosive that you just get a touchdown like that, then what does it really matter? I mean, I don't want to seem one of those shake their fist at the clouds guys. Maybe I'm getting a little old for this. Maybe we all are. But I don't think it's so critical to look at EPA and DVOA and success rates. As long as you're scoring the points you needed, however you get them, I don't think it's that big of a difference. Aaron Quinn on Cover One is all about toxic differential, your explosive plays and your turnovers combined. And I think that's combined is a lot more critical than your success on each individual play, which will invite a lot of variability like turnovers, penalties, and other things that can disrupt your ability to score in any given drive. Carson, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on it. Like, at the end of the day, it's so results driven, like the business. So, like, I don't care how it's done. Just put points on the board. Like you said, one play is definitely one way to do it for the success rate compared to a 10 play and, the 25% compared to the 10 to 13. I agree. Like, I don't care how it's done. To me, it's just get the job done. And I always, when you're talking about Ken Dorsey, the number one thing that comes up is always, the expected or the EPA and stuff like that. But it was really never translate to real points. Like, it was a team that always moved the ball. But, when it came to scoring points, they couldn't do it. So whether it was a turnover, bad sack, penalty, whatever it was, like, it just couldn't happen. I think that's where Dorsey was a little unfortunate, whether it was him or some of the guys on the offense or just pure luck. I think that's where he became a little unfortunate. But, it was great to see, us punching it in, being a little aggressive even in the third quarter. So I loved that.
Yeah, I'm with you completely because like the underlying numbers were never the issue with Dorsey, but there was I think Cover One Eric Turner put out today that the flow and the way that the scheme was not drastically different. The Bills did not attack these teams differently in a schematic way, but the flow of the game and when they called plays and how they kind of let loose on some of these plays was what Joe Brady did differently. And I think Mike and we talked about that a lot, like the last couple of weeks, that our biggest issue with Dorsey was that it seemed like everything was so formulaic. Like it was like, at this time, we're going to call this, at this, we're going to do this. And Joe Brady felt like it just felt like it was more in the flow, in the rhythm of what the offense was doing within the game and what the defense was showing them too. That mesh touchdown play that they run, and you get the defense moving side to side, is set up because they were moving that defense side to side the whole game, opening up the middle of the field. Josh Allen was not – that was one of my biggest issues with Allen all year, was that it doesn't look like he was taking advantage of the middle of the field. And you look at the passing chart for this game, and there's so many darts over the middle, so much Kincaid over the middle, and Shakir obviously over the middle too. Like they were just taking advantage of things that they didn't seem to be taking advantage of during the year. But I think, all the talk about success rate, all the talk about EPA, whatever else, the success rate I like to look at is points per game. And the Bills scored 30 points in this game. So, I mean, you can sit there and be like, yes, they weren't as efficient, they weren't as everything else, but clearly there was some sort of issue going on. This team who was one of the most dynamic offenses in the league for the last couple of years, who could put up these huge points per game efforts and everything else. They hadn't done it in 5-6 weeks. And regardless of their efficiency level, they put up 32 points against what we said, a great defense. Mind you, the offense for the Jets, obviously, basically non-existent in this game. Their best quarterbacking play was from the punter. Zach Wilson got demoted, not just to second string, but third string after this game. Like they had a lot of issues going on. Garrett Wilson was basically a non-factor with whatever his big pad he had on his arm and the injury that he was playing through. And I think that kind of probably contributed to his fumble later on in the game and everything else. But this is, remember, just think of, and I know it's week 1 and you don't want to take week 1 into account. It's basically the preseason going on. But this offense looked lost week 1 against this defense. And you transform it 11 weeks or 10 weeks later, and a defense who was still performing at a high level. I think they have been a top 5 defense by most metrics throughout the season. And the Bills it looked easy. Even the drives, I tried to stay off the timeline a little bit, except our live coverage, because I couldn't deal with the roller coaster of emotions in this game. And when I did check at halftime, people were still losing their minds, like, "Oh, we're just kicking field goals." And I'm like, I thought I was watching a different game. I was like, "Am I crazy?" Because it feels like this offense is moving. Like, it felt like last year's offense, where even if they couldn't finish, or the last couple of years, where even if they couldn't finish drives, they were pushing into the red zone. They were having time of possession. They were having these longer sustained drives, and they weren't ending them at the 30 after, like you said, Carson, like a big sack or a turnover or a fumbled snap or anything like that. Like, and it turned out to pay off in the second half, where they had the big explosive play, and then the pass to Ty Johnson, who would have thought Ty Johnson would be the biggest beneficiary of a Joe Brady offense. But I feel like there was just a difference in the way that they decided to attack it, and maybe it was just the energy, maybe it was just the vibes. I mean, Mike, what did Josh Allen mean when he said, "I think I'm back"? What do you think that means?
Well, let's just take a look at some of the things that they were able to do against this Jets team that you were saying. You mentioned how good their defense has been all season. Most points allowed by the Jets all season, even more so than the Cowboys got on them. They gave up the second most yards that they have all season, and that's with a conservative fourth quarter, mind you. The Jets haven't given up 32-plus points since December 5th of 2021, and they hadn't allowed a wide receiver to a touchdown to a wide receiver since our own Stephon Diggs in week 1. And even then they were holding us, under to 16 points or so. As far as Josh Allen goes, this is the first time in 11 games against the Jets that he's thrown 3 touchdowns against any Jets defense, let alone this recent one. He's smiling. He looks like he's enjoying himself. He's out there saying, "I'm back." And who are we to not trust him? I mean, like we said, in the last, even when we beat the Jets last year, it looked like the Jets were containing the Bills in so many different ways. And for us to just break out against this particular defense, regardless of how their offense was just sputtering and just tripping over itself, literally and figuratively at times, to put up that kind of amount of points against one of the best defenses in this league makes me confident for going into pretty much any other game that we have coming up.
Definitely. How about you, Carson? Oh, Carson, the mute monster got you.
Mute monster.
You're right, it did get me. You're right, it did. But as far as Josh Allen back, I think so, man. Like, for starters, I'll disclaim it. I don't think he was, ever like bad. But like the turnovers, like if we can eliminate that, like the one interception, obviously unfortunate, but like I think he's back, and that's such a thing I'm looking forward to.
Well, the one interception going off a Hail Mary rather than going on the same whatever route that is on the sideline that we saw at least 3 or 4 times this year over and over, that's certainly encouraging.
Yeah,
definitely.
No kidding.
And I was like, maybe we'll still get some narratives this week and maybe we still will get it later in the week, but maybe Thanksgiving will help that too, of like, oh, but Josh Allen still turned the ball over, even if it was the Hail Mary at the end. It was into the wind a little bit there too. He still got that thing down there into the wind, which was still just so damn impressive to see.
From what I understand, Joe from the Overreaction podcast over at Buffalo Rumblings, according to him or according to other people, he said there really wasn't any wind in the stadium.
Oh, okay.
Nothing that affected the Hail Mary or the missed extra point or anything to that effect, at least from people on the ground.
Well, see, this is why I don't check Twitter during halftime or any of these times during the game. Because everybody's like, "Why are you throwing that into the wind?" And I'm like, "Whatever. It's a Hail Mary at the end of the half. Let's just let's keep it rolling there." But yeah, it was an encouraging effort all along. Like you said, can the Bills attack defenses like this the rest of the year and have success? I think that they can. And we'll get into some of the teams that they have coming up, because obviously the biggest stretch of the season, even before the season was starting, we knew this would be the biggest stretch of the season coming up. But now we're going to sit here and look at this stretch where they're 6-5 and the AFC is really a wide open conference. You look at the Bills, they're a game and a half out of the division. They're 2 games out of the conference lead. Like, this is a cluster of teams right now. But the biggest thing I'm going to have about is the defense, who obviously was impressive against Zach Wilson and Tim Boyle and whatever the Jets were throwing out there. But they have tests coming up in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, the Eagles this week, they'll have a bye. Going to Kansas City, Kansas City still struggling offensively. I think the stat today I saw was that the Chiefs have 0 points in the second half in the last
for 3 straight games. Yes,
for 3 straight games. Yeah, which is
the
insane.
only other teams who have done that that have gone on to the Super Bowl, or maybe have done that and gone to I forget what the stat was, but all I know is that the 2000 Ravens and the 2015 Broncos also went 3 games without points in the second half. And of course, they both won their respective Super Bowls off of legendary, all-time defenses.
And that KC defense has been nasty all year long. But let's talk about Philly first, because obviously that's next up on the schedule. They were able to affect Mahomes in that second half, but also Mahomes throws a bad pick in the red zone after a nice drive and could have had the game-winning touchdown literally was in Marquez Valdes-Scantling's hands, and he dropped it there in a very sad Bills fans memory, Stevie Johnson-esque drop, I feel like it looked like to me. And the thing about the Eagles defense is we know that D-line is going to be, difficult to play against going forward, but the offense, Hurts really, really struggled under pressure. And this has been my biggest knock on Hurts since he took over this starting job for the Eagles, is that they have had such a perfect roster and such a great team that he has rarely had to be pushed in situations where he needed to go out and make things happen, right? Like how many times have we had to see Jalen Hurts in his career put on the Superman cape like a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen or even a Lamar Jackson? It's very few and far between. Like the situations have been perfect. And in that first half, the Chiefs are getting pressure on him. They're sending the simulated pressures like they always do. Like we've talked about, Mike, that Sean McDermott has loved this year. And they affected Hurts. And still doesn't look right running the ball. I know he had the rushing touchdown last night, but he's still affected by that knee injury. Troy Aikman even mentions on the broadcast that he thinks that this injury is going to affect Hurts for the rest of the year. And obviously that they know, those announcers know more than we do going forward and know what they've heard talking to Hurts and talking to Mahomes during the week. And so I think that this Bills defense, even if it's patchwork and, they've got the injuries, and obviously the secondary injuries are going to be what we're looking at all week between Cam Lewis and Taron Johnson and everybody who was hurt this last couple of weeks. We'll see if Dane Jackson's able to come back and everything, but they've played even with the injuries and that they've had and everything else. Like even a couple weeks ago, you look at the matchup against Cincinnati and we're like, oh man, what is the secondary going to be able to do against Jamar Chase and T Higgins? Dane Jackson had like the best game, I think, of his career. Like he was all over the place. If he can be on the field, Benford's been great, been solid all year long. And Douglas makes plays every single game. Like, and he looks like he's getting more and more comfortable. So I think with the way that the Philly offense, at least the passing game, Mike, I don't think that the Bills are going to necessarily have trouble stopping Hurts through the air, even with the receivers, even with the injuries to the secondary, because of the way we've seen McDermott kind of attack other offenses. And this D-line has been amazing all year. I mean, Leonard Floyd is he's at 9.5 sacks now on the year. Like they have had, Ed Oliver, if you look at every pressure rate for D tackles, he's like leading the league or one of the top 5 guys in pressures from the D tackle position. Rousseau, Epineza have had great years. So how do you feel about the Bills just from the passing defense perspective against Hurts? Because I think we know that Philly's going to want to run the ball against the Bills defense, and that's going to be the biggest test. But if the Bills can get them into 3rd and 6, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, how do you think that this defense will fare against Philly?
There's this little nugget that I saw as of week 6 that I saved because I knew we were going to be facing Philly down the road. It's about Jalen Hurts throwing outside the pocket. Now, keep in mind, this is as of week 6. I don't know how much better he's gotten since then. Last night, he only threw for 150 yards. He got sacked 5 times for negative 26 yards. So looks like he's gettable from a passing standpoint. But as of week 6, throwing outside the pocket, Jalen Hurts had a passer rating of 49.3, only 30% completion percentage, and an average of 2 yards per attempt, mind you. So getting Hurts outside the pocket, generating pressure on him, yeah, you can make him less than a subpar quarterback out there. I'm not as impressed with Philly as I might have been last year. And as far as like Philly's defense and their pass rush is concerned, uh, I haven't been able to get the stats on their defense right now, but from what I remember, they were just making a feast out of all these NFC East quarterbacks that they were taking down on a week-to-week basis, and then they get to the Super Bowl and they can't even touch Mahomes, as far as I remember. And it was just a shootout game, 30 plus points for each team. So I'm still confident in our defense. I'm still confident in guys like Rasul Douglas going out there and what's his stat line? 4 tackles, 3 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 1 fumble recovery, and a partridge in a pear tree. Happy holidays, everybody. Tyrell Dodson went out there, got 7 tackles, a sack, and a forced fumble. We have contributions from guys in this, duct tape defense. Somebody's got to trademark that. Call it the duct tape defense. Put it in one of the, named defenses of all time. But these guys, whether it's the next man up or the next man up, everybody seems to be in the right place at the right time. And that's really all you need to be. You don't need to be a super athlete or, a generational player, which I hope Von Miller can get back to being at one of these days. Let me see where I wrote this. John Fina on one of the on his own Buffalo Rumblings podcast, according to him, he says that Von Miller's closer to being impact player with every week, that he's trusting his body more, that you don't necessarily achieve that in practice. You can only do that in a game time. And it's only been close to a year since he's had his injury. And we know Trey White took his time getting back to form after he had a year off from an injury.
Yep.
And he only seemed to be getting back up to form this very year after an entire offseason. So yeah, we've got guys stepping up where others are still trying to catch up. So I feel pretty good against Philadelphia with our defense right now. Carson, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, the part that's I think we're going to hang up. I think we're going to be just fine. But the problem that scares me is the secondary against A.J. Brown. Out of the 10 games that they've played, he's been their leading receiver 7 different times. And on top of that, you match him up with Devontae Smith as well. And they're obviously without Goddard, which is huge for us. But I feel, if we can, it's similar to me, like with the Jets with Garrett Wilson. It's about, if you can slow A.J. Brown down, I like our chances to win. Devontae Smith is good, don't get me wrong. But A.J. Brown, without a doubt, having one of the best seasons in a while as a wide receiver. So, I mean, I'm a huge fan of our defense. I just feel if we can get after Hurts, banged up left knee, they could not stop talking about it at the broadcast last night. So I feel if we can get after him, Leonard Floyd does his thing, and maybe Von Miller contributes, like that would be fantastic. But 1 week at a time, I will say he's getting there a little bit from what I can tell, but it's rough. Like Zach said at the game the other night that we should get the graveyard shift guy from Tops down the street instead of him. But that was hilarious. But I don't know, man. It's tough with Von. I want to see him succeed so bad, especially with that contract. But right now, it just doesn't look like he's 100%. And I really like Leonard Floyd and Greg Rousseau coming off the edges of this game. So, I mean, if we can contain A.J. Brown to probably less than 100 yards, I really do like our chances to win. And they're a physical football team, so we got to bring our stuff.
The one thing I did notice, and I haven't rewatched this game, and it's just from the naked eye of just watching the TV broadcast and everything else. But I try to watch when Von's reps have been out there the last couple of weeks, and it still seems like even with this game, and obviously Zach Wilson was ineffective. No matter if us 3 were on that defensive line, he probably would have been ineffective. But they were still scheming plays away from Von. Like they're running play action and they're running away from Von, or if they're rolling Zach out, he's rolling away from Von, or they're shifting like. They're not giving him the opportunity to get there either. And it does look like he has a little bit more of the burst than he's had, at least from a couple weeks ago. And it hasn't resulted in the sacks or big plays or anything yet. But like you said, Mike, it hasn't even been this week will be the year mark of him tearing his ACL. And so he's really now hopefully getting back into that form, because this is what people have called a 2-year injury, coming back from these ACLs. Yes, guys can get back on the field from it earlier than you used to be able to, say 10, 15 years ago. But get back to your top athleticism takes a little longer. And maybe Von will be rounding into form right around now, and that's what they were kind of hoping for with this ramp up period when you come into these big games and hope that he can come and have an impact.
Is it possible that people were let down by his generous prediction of being able to be ready week 1? Of course, we all even knew at that point how overly optimistic Von Miller is, but still, him sort of giving that sort of goal for himself and not being active, and even for the first few weeks, were the expectations a little too high coming into the season? You think? You guys?
Yeah,
think?
For sure. And maybe he could have been on the field week 1 too, for all we know too. But I feel like what we would have seen is more likely the same as this, and that's probably what the coaching staff decided. Whether he was healthy technically enough to be on the field, I think they made the right decision, because clearly he wouldn't have been healthy enough to make a real impact on the field. So yeah, I think definitely optimistic Von. I appreciate Von Miller, the man, for being as optimistic and speaking things into existence like he does. But as a football fan and as a Bills fan, I can understand why you're like, man, Von, I just wish you wouldn't say some of these things, because maybe, we wouldn't have thought that DeAndre Hopkins or Odell Beckham would be a Buffalo Bill, or these other things going on. But other than that, I am very encouraged by what this defense has looked like and what I saw last night from watching that game, and just watching those two teams. It was a good football game. It was a fun game to watch, but those teams both have flaws. Like Mahomes is searching for answers. He's throwing to Justin Watson 12 times a game. Like that is not what they envisioned coming into this year at all. But that defense is really strong. And Philly, like you said, Carson, they couldn't stop mentioning that Jalen Hurts has that knee issue. And for a guy that, really thrives off his mobility, and not just his mobility, but just being in the running game, like Coach Nick Sirianni, local Lakewood, New York native, they really run like a high school offense where they're just running their read options at you all game. They run Swift, they'll run Boston Scott, they'll run Gainwell, and they'll run Hurts. And Hurts has not been able to be used as the weapon that he usually can. And I feel like it takes that dynamicism out of the run game for them. And that's what would worry me the most going into this matchup, is we know how susceptible this Bills defense can be, a Sean McDermott defense can be, to a great rushing attack. And I don't think that Philly is going to be as potent this Sunday as they have been in the past. What do you think, Mike?
I'll defer to Carson.
Yeah. So I was looking at it right now. Their leading rusher, I mean, typically as of late, they've been spread out. But weeks 2 and 3, Swift, 175 yards was their leading rusher. And then the next week, week 3, 130 yards. After that, they have not had a leading rusher over 72 yards, which was Jalen Hurts in week 5. So they obviously spread the ball out. I saw Boston Scott get in the mix a little bit last night, along with Kenny Gainwell. So really, I think it comes down to whether or not our defensive line and our linebackers can handle the physicality of, Philadelphia. They came into our house a few years ago, back in the Carson Wentz days, and just manhandled our front four, and that cannot happen again. So I think it comes down to whether or not the defensive line can really hang with the physicality of that offensive line for Philly. And if we can, I don't see how they're going to be able to run it down our throat.
Speaking of going into somebody's house, a little factoid: the Bills have not won in Philadelphia since 1996. Now, part of that is the infrequency of facing the NFC and alternating your sites, but still something to look out for.
That's a crazy stat. I do remember I believe probably the last game in Philly would have been the LaShawn McCoy return game, and I think it was a Bills. I can't remember the score. It was about 24-19, 26-21. It was basically the death of the Bills' playoff hopes that year. Vividly remember watching that just because of that fact to begin with. Now we don't have to talk. Well, I guess this year we have to talk about the Bills' playoff hopes going forward more than we've ever had to, as they're sitting at 6-5. And that's a good segue into our last topic before we get into our predictions for the game, because the AFC, man, it's a cluster. There's a lot of in the hunt, but even the teams in the playoff spots right now, like we said, there's a lot of flaws, and there's going to be a lot of room for movement. So I just want to kind of walk through the schedules of some of these teams real quick and just get your guys like quick impressions of them. Let's start with the Miami Dolphins, who the Bills are only a game and a half back of right now. Their schedule remaining: at the Jets, at the Commanders, home to the Titans, home to the Jets, and then it gets tough. Home to the Cowboys, at the Ravens, and then obviously week 18, hosting the Bills. So Carson, how do you feel about the Dolphins schedule? They're 7-3 right now. If I had to give you a prediction for their record, what would you think it would be, quick?
Finishing the year, I think they're probably going to finish 11-6, which will give us a chance, I think, at the division if we can focus on focus on ourselves. And that Week 18 game, huge. That's where it's going to be the deciding factor, I think.
As of this week, the Dolphins are still consistently losing to winning teams and beating up on mid to lower tier teams. If you follow that logic, yes, 11-6 is what you would end up getting.
Well, that could set up for if we have a 11-5 Dolphins and a 10-6 Bills, which seems like it could be if the Bills go on a nice little run here. Obviously, that's what we would ideally be 10-6, maybe get a split or 2-1 of these next couple tough games. That'll be a Sunday Night Football AFC East title game that will just be a little bit stressful. But I think that is everybody's been talking about making the playoffs and everything else. The division still is not out of reach, especially if you get a huge win this week against Philly. The Chiefs, let's run through their schedule quick, Mike. Chiefs at Raiders, at Packers, hosting the Bills, at the Patriots, hosting the Raiders, hosting the Bengals, at the Chargers. Feels like a pretty easy schedule for the Chiefs. Doesn't feel like they're going to really get tested. That Bills game, obviously the toughest one left there with the Burrow injury. Maybe 13-4.
I mean, they might get into a shootout with the Chargers at the very end, but I don't see anybody that besides us that can really match their offense. As sputtering as it is, I don't really see anybody scary here.
Agreed. 12-5, I'd say probably. That's my take.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm with that. All right, let's go to the Jags, who the biggest game in the NFL this week besides Bills Eagles. Who would have thought? The Jaguars in Houston at the Texans. Then they host the Bengals, at the Browns, host the Ravens, at the Bucks, host the Panthers, at the Titans. This is a tough stretch for we're going to really learn about the Jags in the next 4 games. I mean, that Bengals game would have been a bigger deal, but I feel like and then I'll mention the Texans here too quick because we kind of have to lump them together. They host the Jags, host the Broncos, go to the Jets, go to the Titans, host the Browns, host the Titans, at the Colts. The Texans schedule is way easier going forward. So this game, Carson, on Sunday is huge in the AFC South and for the playoff race in general, because if the Jags lose this one, they could really start slipping up in a couple of those games down the stretch, I feel like.
Yeah, the Jags are such a patchy football team. I mean, they start the season off average at best. Then it started to turn when they beat us. They go on an absolute heater, get absolutely destroyed at home against the Niners. But I still have them taking the division. I think I love CJ Stroud and what he's done, but it just feels like they're still lacking just the it factor on that Houston team. They've come away with a lot of close wins and convincing wins. Just I don't think it's their time yet.
All right.
The only things I see from the Jaguars are facing the Texans, who have been on a hot streak as of late, and the Ravens. Everybody else is either banged up at quarterback or is just not as much of a threat as they are. So I'd say the Jags are well on their way to winning the division, unless the Texans beat them this Sunday and make a run of it.
Well, that's a great segue into our next team, because you didn't give any credit to this team. The Cleveland Browns, 7-3, a half game behind the AFC East or AFC North leading Ravens.
The Browns are going to be the Jets of the North. That offense living off their defense.
They really have it, and they escaped that Steelers game this week. Obviously, 13-10. DTR does enough, but Matt Canada gets fired after it.
Who didn't escape? Matt Canada.
Matt Canada did not escape. So they go
in-season coaching change for the Steelers since 1941.
That's fucking crazy, man.
Wild.
I saw that stat earlier today. That is insane. This Browns team, I'm with you. I think on the way this they're gonna turn into a pumpkin here soon. At the Broncos this Sunday. Feels like the Broncos can win that game, honestly. Like the way that's going to be an ugly ass game, but you put DTR on the road against that Broncos defense, it could get scary. Then they go to the Rams, tricky game. We already said they host the Jags, host the Bears, which the Bears had an awesome performance this week against the Lions. I mean, they come away with a loss, but Justin Fields was incredible, had over 100 yards rushing, had a great passing game in his first game back. Then they go to the Texans, host the Jets at the Bengals. So we're not believers in the Browns here. You think that that's about a 500 finish? They're about a 10-7, 9-8 team.
Yeah, looks like it. I mean, I can see them beating the Bears more or less. Probably the Jets. I mean, that's going to be a defensive struggle the next to last game of the season.
Yeah.
I'd say
Go
9-8. DTR's got to make a few big plays in each game, I think, for that team to make it to 10-7. If they get 10-7, I think they probably get in, but that division is going to cannibalize itself, I think. So he's going to have to make a few big plays, and that defense is phenomenal, and they're going to have to keep that up.
Yeah, for sure. We could go through the Steelers, but I feel like the Steelers are a broken team. They got at the Bengals this week, host the Cardinals, host the Pats, at the Colts. Go ahead.
Yeah. They seem to have a favorable schedule that I'm seeing. I'm seeing what you're seeing. The Bengals, the Cardinals, Patriots, Colts, Bengals again, Seahawks, and Ravens. They actually beat the Ravens, recall, week 5, 17-10, with a Matt Canada offense, mind you. So, and we've seen what a different new offensive coordinator, how they can spark a struggling offensive team. But of course, who's their quarterback again? I'm blanking on him. Pickett's no Josh Allen, of course.
It's a tough quarterback name. It really is. You got a quarterback named Pickett. It's really unfortunate.
Like having a coordinator named Nate Hackett or something.
And then you look at the rest. We won't go through any more schedules, but the Colts, Denver, Cincinnati, all at 5-5. The Raiders at 5-6. Like, really, what it comes down to is the Buffalo Bills. Obviously, this is the 3 toughest game stretch, maybe of anybody else in the league. But they come out of this 2-1, and then you're looking at, the last couple games there on the schedule with the Chargers, the reeling Chargers, who Brandon Staley is blaming his offense for all their issues when they've had one of the worst defenses. And no longer have their Bosa available to them. You got the Patriots, who the Bills will, I'm sure, be looking to have a better performance against at home. It's really sizing up nicely if this week's vibes were not, fool's gold. If it wasn't just them beating a lame duck Zach Wilson and getting a new jump with some different, not a different scheme, but some different looks from Brady. Because this, like you said, this Philly team is obviously the class of the NFC right now. And like you said, Carson, if Philly wins this game, they're going to dominate in the trenches. The offensive line has been elite for years. Their defensive line is really strong. It's going to be one of the biggest tests of the year for the Bills. Much improved offensive line this year, but still a big test for them nonetheless. So as we get out of here, as we wrap up, I'm putting Mike on the spot first. I need a score predict. It's only Tuesday too. But I need a prediction for Sunday at 4:30. Bills at Eagles. Those beautiful Kelly green uniforms on our screen. We get another week of Nance and Romo. How we feeling?
I'm feeling pretty good about the offense all of a sudden. I'm seeing encouraging things from Joe Brady all of a sudden. Pre-snap motions, scheming players open, using players outside of Diggs and Kincaid here, using running backs in the passing game, utilizing the middle of the field as you touched on, and yards after catch on the majority of our touchdowns. So let's just say at least 20 points. 24-17 sounds like a good score.
I love it.
I respect that. You touched on Joe Brady. I think he did a great job in his first game. Ton of motion for, I think, the most since 2019. And from what I loved the first drive, although it didn't work out. Actually, the first 2 drives we tried the screen game. It didn't work great, but kept the Jets honest, and it opened things up. I think from there we got Shakir involved nice early and often. I think Shakir is going to be a huge pivotal factor. If he has another great game, I think it's going to be an absolute shootout. But my take, 31-27, comes down to a last minute drive. Philly wins.
Okay. I think that you guys are both right. This is going to be it's going to be a close game, much like last night's was for Philly. It was a close game throughout. I think that this Bills front four puts Hurts in a lot of bad situations. I know Jalen Hurts had the best game of his career probably in the Super Bowl in that loss. And that was like dispelled a lot of notions of that. Can Hurts be a Superman? Can he carry them? But I have not seen it enough throughout his NFL career. And I have seen Superman on the other side. I was really worried if the Eagles were going to, and I'm a big, letdown game, emotions going into a game. I would have been a lot more worried if the Eagles lost that game to a Patrick Mahomes last second drive. And then the Eagles are coming in kind of wounded and like, man, we really got to get back up with the Cowboys chasing us. But they had a lot of emotions after winning that game. You could see Nick Sirianni celebrating with Eagles fans after, and just the way that team celebrated this victory on a short week with this Bills team coming in. And this Bills team's got to be feeling good this week. I mean, to have that win and not just winning a game, but the way it went, to see the quarterback excited the way he was, and just like we talked about last week, they feed off of his energy, and they need to be high energy. They are a vibes team. They're a team that needs to have some variance and play off their emotion, because that's what they've been best at the last couple of years. So I think they're going to come in confident, and I think that they're going to come in with a good game plan to maybe not stop. Like you said, AJ Brown is going to probably have a nice game. The Bills have had some issues with wide receiver one throughout Sean McDermott's tenure. But I think even if AJ Brown has a big game, I think they can shut down Smith. With Goddard out is a huge loss, because just affecting the way that Hurts kind of works through his progressions and everything else. I think they do enough to slow him down. I don't think Hurts will be able to run the ball as effectively. He just looks hampered. And I think this Bills offense has been different this year. It looked different last week, and we'll keep that up. I've got the Bills 27-24. It's the opposite in overtime. It's the opposite of last year's of the Tampa game from 2 years ago, where that's what this feels like going into it, where the Bills were like, we don't know where they are. Like, they really need to get rolling on a win here. And while that one was a very encouraging effort in a loss, I think this one gets the Bills hype train fully rolling going into the bye week and a huge matchup with KC. But I got 27-24.
Love it.
Sounds good.
All right. We paid the bills. Now, everybody have a great Thanksgiving. Happy Thanksgiving to you both. Hope you have some great meals, some great football on Thursday. And it's going to be a long wait till Sunday, that's for sure. But I cannot wait to see how this game plays out. But for Mike, for Carson, this is Jake Micah. Good night now.
Yeah.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.